welcome back to DEC Does What? My name is Sean Mahar, your host here. Pronouns he, him, along with
Erica Ringwald, she, her.
We're excited because, again, on the show, we've covered a lot of ground. Last week's episode on the Grum and Plume really started focusing on our environmental remediation efforts, really cleaning up our toxic legacy here in the state.
Yep.
But really today, we're excited because, on the other hand, we're trying to keep waste out of the environment and out of our landfills. And we have two of our experts on from the Division of Materials Management that we'll introduce here in a second. But many listeners may not know, or maybe they do because they pay attention to DEC stuff, that we have a solid waste management plan that we created here for the state in 2023 that really, takes a look at climate change and the impacts of solid waste on our emissions overall, really looks at the key contributors that drive emissions from our waste cycle, food scraps being one of them. I don't want to spoil too much of what our guests are going to talk about today, Erica, but we have a lot of work that we're doing on solid waste management and on waste reduction efforts overall. But Erica, why do we want to talk to people about solid waste management today?
So, Sean, diverting waste from New York's landfills and helping to build a more resilient and recycled supply chain is really integral to achieving the goals of New York's ambitious Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. That's our climate law. And these actions, as well as the state's ongoing investments, are really designed to reduce the waste that's generated in New York State with the goal of reducing waste disposal 85% by 2050. That's a big number.
Definitely. And these issues, solid waste management, reduce, reuse, recycle, recycling, it's really one of the reasons I became a conservationist and really why I wanted to come work for DEC as a young kid growing up. I knew that, DEC was doing a lot to manage and make landfilling better, less polluting to the environment, really upgrading the landfills overall. But waste reduction was key and something my mom really instilled in me as a young kid to really reduce, reuse, recycle. And I think that's more relevant than ever now. So we're really excited to have Amy Bloomfield and Kayla Montanye on the show today to talk about what we're doing across the state to instill a stewardship ethic when it comes to waste management in New Yorkers and really reduce waste overall. So Kayla, Amy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us. We're excited to be here.
Excited to be here.
So when it comes to our implementing our solid waste management plan and our recycling efforts overall, I guess, what are you two focused on and what do you want to kick the show off today talking to our listeners about?
So, really kind of starting with some overall background on our programs and initiatives that we work on. So in our group, pretty much everything that we do can be connected back to the phrase reduce, reuse, recycle, as you were mentioning. And we work on, overseeing important environmental laws and informing businesses and New York State residents about those important environmental laws. We also work on educating businesses and residents about reduction, reuse, and recycling. So some of the important environmental laws that our group oversees are things like New York State's bottle bill, the Returnable Container Act. So listeners might be really familiar with that. That's the 5-cent deposit on certain beverage containers. You go to the store, you can get your deposit, get your 5 cents back at the store or redemption centers. Also, we oversee the state's plastic bag ban and also the state's foam container and loose fill packaging ban. So foam meaning styrofoam. So we oversee those important environmental laws. And then we help to raise awareness during in-person outreach events and through digital outreach on reduction, reuse, and recycling and important environmental holidays like Skip the Straw Day and Buy Nothing Day. And then we're really excited about the reduction, reuse, and recycling action items in the state solid waste management plan to reach that goal of 85% reduction by 2050. And then additionally, we have some fantastic university partners that are all involved with reduction, reuse, and recycling efforts and researching those things. And again, all to make sure that we can take New York State's materials management system to the next level to get to that 2050 goal.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, there's a lot of different ways that New Yorkers engage with our program. Like Kayla was saying, there are a lot of environmental laws and regulations that are meant to reduce waste and protect people and the environment. And so a lot of the times people are engaging with our program to learn more about these laws and regulations. Maybe they have questions. Maybe when people are out and about, they may have noticed, violations related to some of these programs, which, by the way, if you visit our website at dac.ny.gov, we do have complaint forms. So for those programs like the plastic bag ban or the foam ban, you can submit complaints that our program follows up on. We also engage a lot with businesses on those programs. So everyone generates waste, right? So it's our goal to help people properly manage their waste and reduce, reuse, and recycle. A lot of the times people may reach out to us and just say, hey, I have this thing. Like, what do I do with this item? How do I properly dispose of it? Is it recyclable? If it is recyclable, how do I recycle it? So those are some ways that people engage with our program.
Well, welcome to my garage. And I have a lot of things that I have stored in that garage because I want to find the most appropriate way to dispose of it. It leads to, obviously, a lot of angst on the home front sometimes, but I'm always trying to do the right thing. And I think there is a misconception out there, right? You throw something in the wastebasket, you throw something in your garbage, and poof, it just magically disappears. But it actually goes somewhere, right? So where does the waste go that we generate in our households now? And sort of what does that picture look like in New York?
So if we're talking about, recycling specifically, so, when people put something in the recycling bin, we would like to know when you're putting stuff in your recycling bin, it should be items that belong there in your recycling bin. And you can know if something belongs in your recycling bin or not by making sure to check your local recycling guidelines. And then from your recycling bin, the items in the bin they're transported to what's called a recycling facility or materials recovery facility. And so once they're there, items like paper, plastic, glass, and metal, they get sorted out. And then they are bundled up into these big bales. So there might be, bales of aluminum cans and big bales of cardboard. You can kind of think of these bales as big bundles like hay bales. And then those big bundles, they are sold and turned into new materials. So new items. So those would be items that are made from recycled content. So your plastic water bottle, if you're putting like plastic bottles in the recycling bin, if your local recycling program accepts those items, they might be turned into things like carpeting or a fleece. And then cardboard, that might be turned into another cardboard box or cereal boxes. So that's just kind of an overall, picture of recycling in a nutshell. And it's just super important to make sure that the items that you're putting in your recycling bin are items that should be there following your local recycling guidelines. And you can find that information on recyclerateny.org.
So I've heard a lot about the expression wish cycling, the things that we wish were recycled. What are some of the most common items that people think they can recycle that wind up in their recycling bins that shouldn't be there? And then what happens to that stuff?
So wish cycling, definitely different than recycling. So wish cycling is, it's people have good intentions with it, but it has really negative impacts on the recycling system. So wish cycling would be taking items, say maybe from your garage and putting them in the recycling bin and hoping that something good, happens to them. You have good intentions. You want something good to happen with them. However, there's really negative impacts with wish cycling. These items end up at a recycling facility. Say, for example, if you put a jump rope in the recycling bin, it can get tangled around recycling facility equipment. There's people that work at recycling facilities. I think that's something that a lot of people forget about. People have to fix the equipment. They can get injured fixing the equipment. And then when the wish cycled materials get mixed in with the really, good, valuable recyclables, it actually decreases the value of those good recyclables. So overall, wish cycling is a no, and we encourage people to check their local recycling guidelines. And there are some very common items that people tend to wish cycle a lot.
Yeah, and as far as the main challenges and the main items that are difficult for people, I think a few years ago, if you would have asked us that question, our answer may have been a little more broad. However, over the past few years, DAC has begun administering funding from the Environmental Protection Fund to the University at Buffalo. and that funding established the New York State Center for Plastic Recycling Research and Innovation. And there's many tasks and projects happening with research scientists as part of the New York State Plastics Center, but one of which is a really interesting project looking at New York State residents' knowledge and attitudes about recycling and reuse. So we're working with social scientists to get a better idea of what those challenges are. Shout out to Dr. Janet Yang. She's an amazing social scientist and knows a lot about human behavior. And we are working with her on these surveys. So we have worked conducting a number of surveys of New York State residents. And so we do know that New York State residents think that recycling is important. 83% of New York State residents believe recycling is important, but we also know that we have learned that there are some challenges that people face when it comes to recycling rate and recycling properly. So the top 5 kind of categories of items that are challenging for New York State residents. The items that people are putting in their recycling bins that don't belong there are plastic pouches, receipts, batteries, electronics, and cell phones, plastic bags, and ceramics and drinking glasses are the number 1 items.
So a drinking glass, like a pint glass or something like that, isn't recyclable glass?
Exactly. And so when you're putting glass in your recycling bin, you should really only be putting in what we refer to as container glass. So that's jars and glass bottles. And the reason for this is because other types of glass include additives where they melt at different temperatures. So when you start putting those other items in with glass, when glass is recycled, it's melted at really high temperatures to make new glass products. And essentially those other glass items kind of make an unstable glass product. So you really want to keep those other glass items out of your recycling bin.
So save the pint glass for your yard sale.
Exactly. You can reuse stuff like that, donate it, and we'll get a little bit into that later.
So taking a step back, you talked about, bans and the bans on things that we've done, from plastic bags to styrofoam. Are these working, and are we noticing a difference from these policies that we've put in place?
Absolutely. So with respect to the plastic bag ban, we know that there are over 500,000 stores in the state that are required to comply with the law. And we are seeing excellent compliance throughout much of the state. And where we do have issues of noncompliance, we are addressing those complaints, addressing those violations, and we encourage the public to continue submitting, instances of violations to us. And then we're also following up with penalties. So we are making sure that these entities are complying with these laws in order to protect New York State's environment. And Amy, did you want to mention anything on the foam ban?
Yeah, I would say similar with the foam ban, New York's foam ban, it's a little bit younger than the plastic bag ban, so it's a little bit newer. We, again, are also seeing good compliance across the state. And similarly, like we were saying before, the public can submit complaints to us. We follow up with education about the foam ban and work with people so they can start using, compliant alternatives. But yes, same. We're seeing relatively good compliance and kind of take action where needed.
So are you two and our teams going store by store, knocking on doors, checking in, helping them out? Or how does that work to get the word out on these new policies that we have?
Sure. So I can talk a little bit about the plastic bag ban, and then Amy, if you want to talk a little bit about the foam ban. So for the plastic bag ban specifically, we have a multi-pronged approach. So we have an education component. So we do compliance phone calls, and then we have an in-person education component in the New York City area. So that's doing just what you said, going store to store, conducting that in-person outreach and education. And then we have inspections going on statewide, and that is, store by store. And those inspections are conducted on a rolling basis statewide to inspect on reports of noncompliance, see if there are any violations occurring, and issue penalties if necessary. So that's kind of our overall process in a nutshell. And then for the foam ban?
Yeah, foam ban, similar process, a little bit different. The statewide foam ban actually doesn't cover New York City. New York City has a separate, their own foam ban that they implement. So we cover the rest of the state, but we have a similar process. Education. We also have inspectors throughout the state that are going out and conducting inspections where needed. Have the outreach and education components. And we have a lot of really good resources for people that have to comply with the foam ban. So definitely visit our website if you want to learn a little bit more about that and check out those resources.
When in doubt, check it out.
Yes.
And don't put plastic bags or film plastics or styrofoam containers in your recycling bin. Yes, when in doubt, check it out.
So that's a great point, because I feel like there's a lot, not unlike glass, right? There is some confusion about different plastics. What do you think is what are some of the main misconceptions about plastics recycling?
Yeah, I would say the main one, don't trust the chasing arrows symbol. And I'll say it again, don't trust the chasing arrows symbol. And especially when it comes to plastic, that's the little triangle with the arrows with the number inside that you see on many, plastic products. And we have found in our surveys that we're doing with the social scientists at the Plastic Center that a lot of people do think this means something's recyclable and it can go in your recycling bin. Unfortunately, the chasing arrow doesn't always mean something is recyclable and can go in your recycling bin. When it comes to plastic, when you see the arrows with the little number in it, that's what we refer to as a resin identifier code. And the numbers actually stand for the different types of plastic resin that those items are made out of. So whenever you're recycling things, like items have to go together. So the number ones are sorted with the number ones, the twos go with the twos, and so on. So it's kind of an indicator of plastic type and what items have to go together. So it doesn't necessarily mean an item is recyclable. So it's always really important to check with your local program rules and only be putting items, especially plastic items, in your recycling bin that are accepted in your local program. I think, we need to make T-shirts that say, don't trust the chasing arrows. I don't know, but, sometimes you also, in addition to wish cycling, you might hear terms like greenwashing. So that kind of means when people want a product to appear environmentally friendly, they might place the chasing arrows, on something, even when it's not recyclable or environmentally friendly. So you kind of need to stay on top of that.
The more you know.
The more you know. And when it comes to the more you know, obviously we talked, foam bans, plastic bag bans. That's part of our reduction efforts, right? We're trying to reduce waste going into the waste stream in general, right? Start from there. So what are some of the tips that you would want listeners to know about, and where can they start with waste reduction overall in their daily lives?
So reduction and reuse are our favorite things.
Mine too.
The phrase goes reduce, reuse, recycle, and reduction and reuse are so important because it helps to conserve natural resources and saves energy, and it's something that everybody can do in their everyday lives. And it's just some easy steps that people can take. I mean, of course, with the plastic bag ban, thinking about bringing your own bag, even simple things, if there's something that you can, maybe that you already have that you can use for a new purpose. And then, Amy has some great tips as well in terms of things that people can do to reduce and reuse.
So other things people can do, there is a really great tool from the Recycle Right New York campaign. Shout out to Recycle Right New York, recyclerightny.org. It's called the Reuse Locator Map, and it's basically a locator tool where you can look up your location and find lightly used items, secondhand items. You can find locations to donate things that you have that are in good condition. So things like furniture and tools, all kinds of things. So that is a great way to get started with a little bit more reuse. We also encourage people to try to do a waste audit at home. And I don't know if anyone has ever participated in a waste audit. Some people are nodding their heads. And it's essentially where you look at all of your garbage over the course of a day or two, or maybe even a week if you want to. And you basically see what kind of trash you're making. And it can be really helpful to look at items and identify where you can replace maybe single-use items with reusable or refillable items or packaging-free items. Sometimes we do waste audits at DAC facilities. Kayla and I love doing waste audits. And, when we look for volunteers and we ask people to help us go through the trash, people are usually like, are you crazy? But then, everyone has
fun for us.
Such a good time. Like, everyone's always smiling, and it's so fascinating to look at what's in the trash. So, you can do a waste audit at home. And we always say to use what you have. You don't need to change overnight. You don't need to buy fancy things. You probably have everything you need to get started. Reducing and reusing more. So we always like to kind of remind people of that. You can also look out for events like repair cafes in your communities. Repaircafe.org for more information. But those are essentially community events where there are repair coaches. So if you have an item that needs to be fixed, you can go to these local events and a repair coach can teach you how to repair the items you have and help you fix those things.
Again, we're talking, dec.ny.gov has a lot of, is an important gateway to find out more of these opportunities to reduce waste in our daily lives, to recycle right, to look at creative and beneficial reuses of our products. And it's really awesome to hear you both speak passionately about it. On the waste audits, I'll share a quick aside. In college, I gave a presentation one day where I decided to do a waste audit and live in front of the class. And I grabbed our townhouse's garbage bag and just opened it up. Let's say there were some surprises that I didn't expect to find in that garbage. But, it's
the more you know.
The more you know. But when you go through that, you really look at, I could use this different. I could recycle this. Or why did we even buy this thing in the first place? And, that's really part of our efforts overall.
Yeah, I love one of the tips for folks to buy used, buy less, and to buy durable. I've been having these conversations a lot with my kids, because they always want to buy something, right? Because they're kids. But don't buy something unless you love it. Don't buy it just because you like it or whatever. You have to love it. Go away for a day, think about it and come back. And don't buy junk. Don't buy fast fashion.
And
right?
Fast furniture. Yeah.
Yeah. And fast furniture that has a lot of other sort of impacts on the environment globally, right? So which leads me to a question, textile recycling and clothing. There have been a lot of documentaries lately about fast fashion and how that gets shipped to other countries and bundled. What are sort of the best ways to get rid of old and used clothing?
Well, first, when it comes to fast fashion, it's not necessarily the clothing item itself, it's how long people are keeping them.
Yeah, people are consuming twice as much as they did, 50 years ago, which that's a lot of stuff.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff. And the thing that, we all see the stuff in the stores or the stuff that arrives at our doorstep. But what we don't see are all of the natural resources that go into, making these things, the energy and manufacturing things, transporting them to stores and to our doorstep. So that's kind of the unseen, kind of forgotten about piece. We just see, what we receive. And so, with textiles, it's certainly one of the fastest growing waste streams.
Yeah. Textiles account for about 5% of our municipal solid waste stream. So the municipal solid waste stream is a little over 40% of our total waste stream. And that's the waste stream most people think of. It's stuff from residents, businesses, offices, schools, places like that. So that's the main waste stream most of us think of. And so textiles are around 5% of that waste stream. It's, like Kayla said, the fastest growing waste stream of all of the material types. So there are a lot of different ways that you can, first, because we love talking about reuse, we would encourage people, if there's some way you can upcycle or repurpose textiles is always good. And upcycling is different than recycling. Upcycling means you're taking an item and kind of directly making something new out of it. So maybe you're like cutting something into strips and weaving a rug out of like old t-shirts. That's an example of upcycling.
So some of it does end up as essentially shoddy material, it's called. And then I think Amy has more information on the remainder of the textiles and the textile recycling stream.
Yeah, so when, you may see those bins in your community. Some of them accept items for donation only, and some accept for donation and recycling. So if you have old worn clothes that aren't suitable for donation, as long as they're clean, dry, they don't have liquids or, as long as they're essentially clean and dry, even if they're ripped or missing buttons or zippers or whatever. Some of the bin programs can accept those items for recycling. So the items that aren't mostly items suitable for donation get donated or sold on kind of secondhand clothing markets. And then the items that can be recycled are, those items are either recycled or here's another fun term, downcycled. So they can be recycled into things like carpet backing or cleaning cloths. We actually know there's a cool program that we know of where people are using shoddy, which is the shredded up textile material, in punching bags. Sometimes we've seen it being used in alternatives for insulation, for packaging and shipping. So there are a lot of cool uses for that. Downcycling is like when it's being used for kind of like cloths used to absorb kind of industrial liquids and stuff like that. But yes, some of it is exported to other countries. And some of our university partners that we're working with are currently looking at the issue of textiles and looking more into how we can support more textile reuse and recycling in New York State.
So how did you two become so passionate about this work and reduce, reusing, and recycling overall? I mean, it's great because it's more people that are singing the same songs that I like to sing, but, what brought you into this work world?
So, growing up, I always loved the water. I still love the water, and started out, in high school, I knew that I wanted to pursue an environmentally focused career, and then went to school for environmental studies, switched to marine science, ended up, after college, interning at Save the River, a nonprofit in the Thousand Islands, and educated students and tourists about the St. Lawrence River ecosystem. Found that I really loved the education side of environmental work. And then after that, did some substitute teaching in the Capital Region. Ended up actually being hired as a 7th and 8th grade science teacher at a school in the Capital District. And then loved teaching, but still I was missing the environmental work. So when this position became available at DEC, it seemed just like a really great combination of education work and environmental work. So it was So I just went for it. So, and it's been great. And I think, everybody has a winding path everybody has a different path to DEC. And that's one of the things that makes working together so great. We all bring together, all of our experiences and perspectives. And Amy has a really neat story too.
Yeah, well, I've heard stories that as a kid, I used to say I didn't want juice boxes in my lunchbox because it was wasteful and bad for the environment. So I've been at this for a long time. But yeah, I mean, my family always took me hiking. I grew up near a DEC Environmental Education Center. So I've just always been sensitive about how people treat plants and animals and the environment. So I ended up going to school for environmental science with a focus on wildlife biology. And then after that, I worked in kind of a lot of different areas, things related to alternatives to toxic pesticides, stream restoration, implementing community science programs. I ran my own business for a while, and then most recently, before my work with materials management, I did a lot of work with threatened and endangered species. And it was kind of my work with threatened and endangered species. That's where I got into DEC. I used to work in the Bureau of Wildlife. And it was my work with threatened and endangered species that kind of got me on the path to materials management. I became really concerned about the impact that our consumption and our waste was having on wildlife and ecosystems and our communities. And so that's kind of how I got here in my position in Division of Materials Management. And yeah, I love working with Kayla. We like tag teaming, and people call us Team Amy and Kayla sometimes. They're always trying to take on the next challenge.
That's awesome. Well, we appreciate you joining us today. We don't want to waste any more of your time and have you both get back to the important work you're doing on reducing, reusing, and recycling in the state. So thanks for all your great tips. I know this is just like a snapshot of really what's available, and there's a lot of information on dec.ny.gov. I imagine listeners can find you two out and get in touch with you and the rest of our teams who are working on these really important initiatives. So thank you both for your great work on DEC and joining us on the show today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Well, Erica, that gave me a lot to think about now. I'm going to definitely go home and check out my garage more closely, really go through my stuff and figure out what can be recycled, what can be reused. But I imagine listeners have a lot of questions of what they can potentially recycle. And I know we gave a snapshot today of going to dec.ny.gov as a starting point. But, want listeners to come to us, too. If you have items in your home that you have questions about, please email us at contact@dec.ny.gov, and we'll put you in touch with the recycling coordinators around the state, and they can answer your questions about what's recyclable, what's reusable, or what should be disposed of properly. So definitely email us, contact@dec.ny.gov. Maybe we'll feature some of your questions on future episodes as well. So got a lot of work underway with recycling in the state, and a great episode today on that. But obviously our work doesn't stop there. And I know we've got some new wetlands regulations that we've put out. What's that all about, Erica?
We recently put out some draft regulations to protect freshwater wetlands across New York State. Those draft regs are out for public comment until September 19th, and we definitely encourage folks to weigh in and share what they think. We're also going to have a couple of public hearings about the regs also in September 10th and 12th. So check out dec.ny.gov to learn more about that. But wetlands really perform a critical function, protecting water quality, helping communities be more resilient to flooding and severe storms, and protecting habitat everywhere across the state.
Yeah, they're some of the most productive ecosystems in the state. I actually got my start as a conservationist doing wetland ecology and amphibian research on the Saratoga battlefield. And
fantastic.
Awesome opportunity to get out and see the frogs, and really instilled in me why wetlands are important. So, the governor's really championed this. This was one of her key policy initiatives 2 years ago, and we're really glad to be at this phase now of getting these regulations in place. So we look forward to getting everyone's comments. But another thing the governor has us on right now is get offline and get outside.
Yes.
It's a really important, beautiful time to be outside in New York in the summertime. And I know we've got some cool places like Santanoni that people can visit. What's going on in Santanoni, Erica?
So Camp Santanoni is one of the few remaining Adirondack Great Camps. It's a pretty amazing, fantastic place, but it's also very remote and not easy to get to. So right now, folks can ride their bikes or hike in. But for those with disabilities, DEC has introduced a new mobility device recreation program. If you do want to visit Santanoni and you need to make that visit more accessible, we are going to be providing that to folks. That information is on the DEC website. Related, we just created a new accessible recreation opportunities map. Awesome. It's an interactive map. It's on DEC's website. It highlights more than 260 places with opportunities for accessible recreation, like boating and camping and hiking across the state. So really encourage folks to check it out.
Super cool tools that we're keep developing to make sure New Yorkers get access and have opportunities to find the places to go. And once they're out there, fishing is great in New York State.
Always.
Looking forward to getting out on the boat this weekend, hopefully, and catching some. But I heard some New Yorkers have had some really great successes recently.
They have. I don't know that you're going to be able to match their feats of angling prowess, perhaps. We recently announced a record-breaking 12-pound, 6-ounce largemouth bass that broke a 37-year-old state record. That's a lot. This was a catch from Cayuga Lake. Also, this month, we announced another record. This one is for a 15-pound, 14-ounce longnose gar that broke a long-standing state fishing record. And the gar was caught in Butterfield Lake in Jefferson County.
That's awesome.
Super cool.
The pictures are pretty cool of that.
The pictures, frankly, with the fish stories are the best.
I was in an aquarium recently with some friends, and they were looking at gars, and they're like, wait, where are these fish from? I'm like, guess what? In our backyard, and you can catch them. And they were surprised to see the pics and see how big they can get. Those are massive fish. Well, I think that brings us to the end of the show today, Erica. Thank you all for listening. Please continue to email us at contact@dec.ny.gov. Let us know what you want to hear more on this show about. But most importantly, Erica, what can listeners do?
Get outside.
DEC Does What is a production of DEC's Division of Communication, Education, and Engagement. Our theme music is an original composition by Mike Menza, wildlife technician with DEC's Division of Fish and Wildlife. Like what you heard on this episode? Please leave a review and share this episode with others. Want to learn more about DEC's wide-ranging efforts to protect New Yorkers and the environment? Visit dec.ny.gov or connect with us on social media. You can find us using @NYSDEC. For more information on DEC Does What, visit dec.ny.gov/podcast.